Oh boy, can I be honest with y'all? I really did not want to make this video because I just don't care about Sonic Lost World. I didn't even know the story of this game prior to working on this video. I watched it when it initially came out, and I haven't thought about it since, and I've forgotten a lot of what this story was, and I was very happy with that. But now, for this, I had to go and rewatch all the cutscenes of the game again, and oh my god, it's so bad. Regardless of all the problems any previous Sonic story may have had, Lost World is actually worse. Like, Lost World has a worse story than Sonic 06. I'm not joking. Because at the very least, Sonic 06 is attempting to do things and has a couple of bits here and there that kinda almost work, sort of. Lost World here, nothing works. Everything is terrible in so many different ways. There's so many different flavors of bad storytelling here. This game is very much a continuation of the attempts to be like a Western American cartoon. We still have the same writers, Pontac and Graf, who I kept calling Warren and Graft in the color story video. So once again, we're going to be going with English here, and I have to say, I tried to give those two a lot of leeway in my color story video, because I feel like people give them way too much credit and way too much hassle for the problems of the storytelling in their Sonic games, because a lot of it does come from Sonic Team. However, I am aware from interviews with them themselves, they had a lot more creative control with the plot and the story of Sonic Lost World. I assume the core ideas, you know, the Lost Hex and the Deadly Six, that still came from Sonic Team, but apparently they had a lot of say in the actual story of the game itself. And considering that, after watching the story of Sonic Lost World again, I feel like I maybe have to retract some of that generosity I showed them in the Colors story video, because the writing here, I'm sorry, it's terrible. It is actually really, really bad. And that was true of the Colors story as well. After doing that story video, I did a rewrite of Sonic Colors, and for that, I went over the story of the game one more time and really analyzed it super thoroughly. And I saw all kinds of, like, bad writing techniques and structural issues and lots of problems there. And Lost World is even worse than Colors was. So bad to the point that, honestly, I'm kind of surprised that Sega kept hiring these two. Because, quite frankly, their writing here is not up to a standard of quality that I would ever find acceptable on a project I was working on. It's bad. It is bad, man. And the story of Lost World in general is so weak that I honestly don't feel like going into super intensive detail breaking down every single cutscene, but we will be going through the general broad strokes and talking about certain scenes here and there, and just the general issues and what the story is trying to do and what fails and why the writing is so poor. Because there's a lot to break down here, actually. Beginning, of course, with the opening cutscene of the game, and hey, we got a fancy pre-rendered cutscene to start off our Sonic game again. Haven't had one of those in a while. Though I do gotta say, this is nowhere even remotely close to the quality of opening cutscenes we've seen in previous Sonic games. The animation, the detail, the rendering quality, it's all clearly a lot lower value here. And it's very clear in general that Sonic games around this time did not have the same amount of budget that previous Sonic games had, and you can see that in many different areas. There's going to be more of that later on here. But anyway, the gist of this scene is that Sonic and Tails are after Eggman because he's up to no good, and while pursuing him, they find this mysterious thing floating in the sky, which Tails says is the Lost Hex. Whatever that's supposed to be. And if you watch my gameplay video on Sonic Lost World, I talked there a lot about how clearly at this time Sonic Team was trying to do a lot to harken back to the original classic Sonic kind of stuff, with the less emphasis on storytelling in general, and the lighter, sillier stories, not doing all the crazy dark anime stuff. And Lost World in particular is very blatant about it. Visually, it's very clearly trying to imitate the look of the original games in so many ways. Like, look at the tornado here in this opening cutscene. It doesn't look like the tornado from previous Sonic games. It doesn't have all that extra detail. It doesn't turn into the X thing. It's not the Cyclone. It's not anything. It's very much more in the stylings of the original tornado from Sonic 2, where it's just a very simple biplane. And if I really wanted, I could go, what happened here? Did Tails rebuild the tornado into its original version and take off all the fancy stuff? But whatever, who cares? We know what's happening here. They just wanted it to look like the original tornado because just in general, they're trying to make this look like original classic Sonic stuff. And the Lost Hex is kind of part of that as well. In concept, just looking at the Lost Hex, I kind of like the idea of it, like this floating, weird kind of mini planet that it's very incomplete and it's made out of these like hexagonal chunks. It's very strange, it's very odd, it's very mysterious and unclear what's even going on here. And that is very much in line with the original Sonic games. They definitely had this kind of mystical, magical, mysterious element to the world. Sonic 1 takes place on South Island, an island that moves around on the ocean. Sonic CD has Little Planet that has a cycle of appearing and disappearing over Never Lake. Sonic 3 and Knuckles has Angel Island, the island that floats in the sky. And I look at the Lost Hex here and I go, yeah, that kind of fits relatively in line with those things. This feels like something that could exist in the world of classic Sonic. However, it's not quite right. This is something I also talked about in that gameplay video. It's trying to harken back to original Sonic stuff, but it feels more like a disingenuous imitation of it, where they're not quite doing things correctly here, because we have no idea what the Lost Hex is, and as far as I'm aware, nothing anywhere gives us any information whatsoever. This shot of it right here, and Tails going, that must be the Lost Hex. Literally all we know about it. And you might think that having so little information on something like this might be kind of cool. It's a mystery. Ooh, what's going on? But ironically, by giving us so little info on this place, it's actually less mysterious and less intriguing than if we had more information. Compare this to the things that they did in classic Sonic. Take Little Planet from Sonic CD. That game's manual told us that it appeared over Never Lake for 1 month out of the year, and Sonic wanted to go check that out. It's a rare opportunity to see something cool. He was not going there to stop Eggman. Sonic did not know that Eggman was up to anything. It's when he got to Little Planet that he saw what Eggman has done to it. Because we have some information about Little Planet, we know how it's supposed to be. So now when we see it transformed and chained to the Earth, we know that this is wrong, and so the game's story is about restoring Little Planet back to normal so it can return to its mysterious cycle of appearing and disappearing. We still don't know what Little Planet is, we still don't know why it is the way it is, and we don't need to know these things. What we know is that this natural phenomena was thrown out of whack by Eggman, but we, as the player, as Sonic, have restored things back to their natural order, and there's a satisfaction that comes in that. Whereas the Lost Hex, we know literally nothing, it's just a place that we go to, and it really doesn't have any significant relevance to the story whatsoever. Sonic and Tails could just as easily land as some generic, nondescript island with no significance, and it really wouldn't affect the story much at all. This is what I'm talking about, and how they fail to recreate the magic of original Sonic with these games. They try to do things that are like the kinds of things we saw in original Sonic, but without fully understanding why those things were the way they are, why those things were even there, and how those things are supposed to be handled. Every attempt to make this more like original classic Sonic is mostly very superficial and hollow, and I don't like it. But anyway, back to the story proper. After doing some exploring, Sonic and Tails get a call from Amy and Knuckles, because this is still very much the era of Sonic friends are bad and they're not allowed to do anything. And in this case, it's pretty egregious, because Amy and Knuckles are here and they literally sit there and do nothing throughout the entire story. In fact, this is one of those problems with the writing of Sonic Lost World that I was talking about. I noticed many of the cutscenes in this game you could just straight up delete and it would have next to no impact on the story whatsoever. This scene is just Amy and Knuckles being like, hey guys, did you save the animals yet? And they're like, not yet. And they're like, oh, go do it. And that's it. We did not need that. And as we keep going, I'll point out more scenes like this where they're just completely pointless. But for now, the next scene is we see Eggman's operation, where he's taking animals from the capsules and putting them into the robots, because again, we're trying to harken back to classic Sonic. And of course, because they don't give a fuck, they don't even acknowledge the fact that this hasn't been a thing for a very long time. Like, Eggman's robots haven't looked like this in a very long time. Eggman hasn't powered his robots with animals in a very long time. They just act like this is business as usual. This is how Sonic has always been, and it's never deviated from this ever, we promise. And this is where we're introduced to the Deadly Six, the new villains of this game. 6 ultimate evil bad guys that how is Sonic ever gonna stop them? And oh boy, the Deadly Six. There's a lot to say about these characters, because oh my god, they're the worst. I hate them. They are the worst Sonic characters ever. Remember in the Colors Story video, I talked about Orbot and Cubot and how we're starting to get the Sonic characters that I just reject? Yeah, these 6 are included in that. I hate these characters. And I know some people are like, oh, they make them better in the comics. I don't want these characters to be better. I want them to stop being because they are terrible and they don't belong in Sonic. I mean, just visually, these characters are A, terrible. They look like reject Sesame Street bad guys or something. But B, they do not fit with the visual style of Sonic in the slightest. And I mean, the series has gone all over the place visually and done all kinds of stuff that doesn't really match. Like, Black Doom doesn't visually belong in Sonic either. But I actually feel these characters are worse, because Black Doom, at least there's a big contrast there, that he's like this dark, realistic, weird alien. Whereas these characters are cartoony. But they're a completely different kind of cartoony than the Sonic characters. They don't follow the same body proportions or general character design principles. They don't match in the slightest with any iteration of Sonic that has ever existed. The clash of these awful character designs, when you put them next to real Sonic characters, it's hideous, man. I cannot stand looking at these characters. But then the characters themselves, what they are and why they exist, I hate even more, because we all know that Sonic Lost World desperately wishes that it was a Mario game, and clearly, these characters are a pathetic attempt by Sonic Team to try to recreate Bowser and the Koopalings. Like, clearly the main one's Zavok, he's supposed to be Bowser, he looks just like him, he's the same kind of character, he's even got some of the same visual design elements. And then all the other ones are Koopalings. They are these incredibly shallow, I want to say one-dimensional, but that's giving them too much credit. They are cardboard standees where you press the button and they say their line, and I'm the fat one that eats food. I'm the crazy one. I'm the emo one. I'm the girl. Man, fuck these characters. They are so bad. And the game tries so hard to make them feel like, oh, they're some serious threat. How are we ever going to deal with them? And I just cannot take them seriously because they're so cynical creatively in why they exist. They look terrible. In gameplay, their boss fights are pathetic. I never want to see these characters again, but unfortunately, for some reason, Sega keeps pushing them. They keep appearing in, like, kart racers and the Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, and they're in the comics, and like, stop. Stop trying to make these characters a thing. No one likes them, they will never be a thing. I mean, for Christ's sake, I genuinely do not even know half of their names, and I don't care to look it up, I don't want to know. It's all just crap that starts with a Z. Zavok, Zaz, Xena, Warrior Princess, Xehanort, whatever, who cares? And this is why I'm not going to be bothering with a lot of the cutscenes here, because quite a number of them are just Sonic meeting with one of the Deadly Six, and they have some pointless, crappy banter, and we have the Pontac and Graf trademark terrible, cringy humor that is awful. Basically, every single one of these scenes plays out like this. Sonic shows up, and then the character's like, "Hi, I'm Zimbo, and this is my character trait." And then Sonic bounces off that character trait with some really forced joke, and then they get angry, and then they fight. And that's all of these cutscenes. So cutting ahead to another cutscene that resembles having some importance, we have another scene of Eggman and the Deadly Six talking. And can I just take a moment to talk about the setting of these scenes? Because this is what I was talking about with those budget limitations. They couldn't even be bothered to make an Eggman's base set, so it's just a spotlight on the floor and a couple of objects in a black void of nothingness. Seriously? This is how low we're stooping with this stuff. Anyway, what happens in this cutscene is Eggman is disappointed in the performance of the Deadly Six for an incredibly stupid and arbitrary reason because the writers couldn't think of anything better. And we see there's a bit of hostility between Eggman and Zondo here, but Eggman then busts out this conch shell thing, and it, like, inhibits them or whatever, and so now they have to listen to him, even though they clearly don't want to. And this entire scene exists to establish only that, because classic Pontac and Graph writing, we have entire extended cutscenes that simply convey one piece of information. Anyway, as the game keeps going, Eggman sends Zordon to go deal with Sonic, and then he's working on his machine over here with Orbot and Cubot, who are still here. Apparently those characters were supposed to be one-offs for Sonic Colors, but Pontac and Graph insisted on bringing them back here. Great, super happy about that. I love these characters so much before. And they serve the exact same role here, in that they don't really do anything other than make terrible jokes the entire story that aren't funny. So, wonderful. Love that these have been turned into recurring characters. Anyway, geez, I'm going on so many tangents here. In this cutscene, we learn that Eggman has some machine that's sucking the life energy or whatever out of the planet. And then, in classic Pontac and Graph style of tell, don't show storytelling, we have Cubot drinking the planet life energy goo somehow, and he just says, "This is making me feel so powerful," because conveying information through things happening is not really their style. They much prefer characters flapping their lips. And the characters continue to flap their lips, explaining that the machine is a bit unstable, and if they use it now, it's going to drain the entire planet of all its energy and kill it. And Eggman doesn't want that. He just wants to take some of the planet's power to utilize it for his own purposes. But, Zotan over here seems to have different plans in mind. And later on, after Sonic has beaten a couple of the Deadly Six, Eggman is scolding them, "Y'all suck, you can't do anything," and they're getting mad at him, and then he does the conch shell thing again, and Sonic and Tails are watching from afar, and Sonic's like, "Oh, that conch shell, Eggman's doing something with that," and Tails is like, "Wait, Sonic, hold on!" But Sonic just jumps in there, and he kicks the shell away, and Eggman's like, "No, you fool, what have you done? That's what I was using to control them, and now they're free to do as they wish." And then there's this really forced, stupid plot point where apparently the Zeti have, like, telekinesis, electromagnetic powers, and they can use that to control Eggman's robots, and they turn them against him. And that really seems like an ass pull to try to make the story they wanted to do here somewhat make sense. So the Deadly Six take over Eggman's robots, and credit where it's due, there is an action scene here that plays out, and it's kinda cool. There's a bunch of shit going on, they're attacking Eggman, and all the robots are shooting, and it's chaos. And it's like, hey, a cutscene where things happen. The characters aren't just standing around and talking. That's nice. Afterward, our good guys and our bad guys meet up and explain the situation to each other, and this takes way longer than it needs to because there's a bunch of terrible jokes shoved in here. And they bring back the voice chip joke for Cubot because that was just hilarious in the Sonic Colors. But now they got a whole other running bit with him in this game about how he doesn't have his body, and there's gonna be so many really, really funny jokes with that, I'm sure. But in the meantime, now the Deadly Six are in control of Eggman's factory and base or whatever, and now they plan on sucking the planet's power dry entirely to power themselves up. And we never see any of this powering up happening. We're just told the characters are getting stronger. What relevance does that have to the story? None whatsoever, but the characters are stronger now because I said they are. And later on, Eggman explains to Sonic and Tails that the Zeti have taken over his machine. How does he know this? I don't know. Maybe he read the script. But either way, point is, the good guys and the bad guys here decide to team up, and because the writers of this story don't know anything about Sonic, the characters act like this is a horrible thing. I hate working with you, Eggman. I could never imagine it. It's not like we've worked together to save the world multiple times in the past. And, oh my god, this leads to the worst scene in the game. So they all get back to Eggman's base or something, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, Tails starts yelling at Sonic, because their plan here is that Eggman has to turn off the machine, because if Sonic just tries to destroy it, then there'll be a giant explosion that'll destroy everything. So, they need Eggman to shut it down, and then Tails is like, "What? You think I can't shut down the machine? You trust Eggman more than me." And it's like, where is this coming from? This is perhaps the most forced plot point that's ever been in a Sonic game before. I think the idea here is supposed to be that Tails is feeling like Sonic isn't trusting in him because he was trying to warn Sonic about the shell earlier, but Sonic just ignored that and jumped in. But to go from that all the way to this, with really nothing in between to connect these two things, no, this does not work in the slightest. My god. But anyway, there's some more pointless cutscenes. I've actually been skipping over a bunch of cutscenes here and not even mentioning them. Mostly of the Zeti going, "Now you go get Sonic Zambambo," and she's like, "I'm a girl," and that's the cutscene, basically. In fact, there's this whole cutscene where Zoltar contacts Sonic and Eggman through a bunch of blocks with a screen on them. I don't even know what the fuck that's supposed to be. Where it's basically they just taunt them and be like, "You guys suck," and then Eggman gets mad. And that's the whole cutscene. Like, why is this in the story? This is completely pointless. Speaking of pointless, there's a cutscene later on where the characters are saying a bunch of inconsequential, pointless garbage, but in the background, Tails is putting Cubot's head on a crab meat. But then, oh no, he starts attacking Tails, and Eggman's like, "Tails, no!" And he jumps out to save Tails from getting attacked. And for some reason, they treat that like a really big thing, like, oh, it's a turning point for Eggman. You know, they argue, but they're working together, and they're starting to become friends. But no, this doesn't lead to anything or go anywhere. This is a completely pointless scene. I guess maybe it's supposed to be trying to convey that Eggman is really starting to connect with Sonic and Tails, and he cares about them. They're friends, and I'm definitely not going to betray them later on. But, I mean, who's falling for that? Come on. And then later on, the Zeti decide that they're going to try to capture Sonic and turn him into a robot. So then there's this fake capsule that's set up, and Sonic's about to hit it, but Tails is like, "No, don't do it, Sonic," and he gets in the way. Again, they're trying to do that thing of Sonic ignoring Tails, I guess. And then Tails is the one that gets captured, and then the Zeti are like, "This ain't no Sonic, this isn't what we wanted. But we could turn you into a robot," and then they start doing that, and in typical bad writing, bad guy fashion, they just leave the room for no reason, so the good guy is unsupervised, so he can do something to escape. And yeah, Tails futzes with the computer, and while Tails is captured and Sonic is worrying about him, we get amazing, wonderful, super relevant, and important cutscenes like this.
"If we don't find your friend, can I be your sidekick?"
What? Shut up! What kind of question is that?
"I didn't mean anything by it. I just thought it might be better to work for you than Eggman."
Hello, I'm sitting right here, you know.
Orbot, no matter what happens, I won't fail again. I will save Tails.
"It's stuff like that that makes me want to be your sidekick. Tails is lucky."
Seriously, I'm right here. I can still hear you.
What did that do to forward the story? Absolutely nothing, but that's a cutscene for some reason. And also a thing that's a cutscene for some reason is Asalamel shows up in front of Sonic, and basically the entire scene is just him going, "Yeah, we're turning your friend into a robot. Okay, bye." And then that scene is followed by a hilarious scene with Orbot and Cubot that lasts all of 15 seconds where nothing happens. So that's 3 cutscenes in a row of pure worthless garbage that you could just rip out. But now we have a cutscene that resembles something of kind of importance. We get an update on how the world is doing with the machine sucking the life energy out of it. And Amy calls Sonic and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot you were in this story. And I skipped a cutscene with them earlier because it doesn't matter. I guess Amy and Knuckles are just here to add some stakes to not only is the world being destroyed, but our friends are too. Oh no! And then later on, Sonic and Eggman are on this bridge over some lava, and then the Zeti start attacking them, and the bridge collapses, but Eggman, he saves Sonic's life, and then the bridge breaks apart more. Now he falls into the lava. Oh my god, they killed Eggman. He's dead forever, for sure. And then we get this really pathetic scene where they're trying to have all this drama, and oh no, all of Sonic's friends, and even Eggman, everyone's gone, everything's falling apart. How is Sonic ever gonna recover from this? This is our hero's lowest point. And you're like, bro, really? You're trying with this story to do something? Keep in mind, I've just been skipping over like half the cutscenes because they are completely inconsequential. And the story has been nothing but terrible, awful humor the entire time. And now they want me to take it seriously. But of course, the reason they're doing this is because then we have Sonic confronting all the bad guys. And they're like, look at the robotified Tails, mwahaha. But of course, we know from earlier, boom, Tails is still in control, and he turns it around against them. And it's like, okay, thank you for doing your one thing, Tails. Now please go back to the background and don't do anything anymore. See, Sonic isn't alone. He still has his friends with him. And like, I see what they're trying to do. Like, there was some tension between Sonic and Tails. I mean, it was unbelievably forced, but they tried to make some tension there. And now when everything's falling apart, Tails is the one that's there for Sonic despite it all. And in a story that wasn't a big pile of garbage, I could see that kind of working. But that's not this story, let me tell you. Anyway, Sonic beats Zanzibar, and he doesn't even get any kind of, like, story finale conclusion to his character. Like, this whole game was about the Deadly Six and all, they're out of control, they've taken over Eggman's robots. And then, once you do the boss fight, they just, like, disappear from the story, as if they never existed. Which is fine by me. I'm okay with the story acting like they never existed. I'd prefer if we all just acted like they never existed. But anyway, Sonic and Tails go to turn off the machine, but when they get there, they find that it's already been turned off. And oh my god, he's not dead. Who would have seen that coming? Turns out Eggman jetpacked away, and while Sonic was fighting the Zeti, he disabled the machine and then used all of its remaining power to power up his super evil robot thing that's a rehash of the final boss from Sonic Colors. And then Sonic beats that, and they save the day. And Tails uses the big machine. He's like, see, I could have turned off this machine. We never needed Eggman. You should have trusted me, Sonic. And Sonic's like, you're right, Tails. I'm sorry. And you're like, oh yeah, they were trying to do a thing with Sonic and Tails here. Wow, that does not work even slightly, but whatever. So Tails sets the machine to give the Earth back its power. I mean, sorry, not the Earth. Not the Earth at all. It's their world. It's Sonic's world, because for some reason, in recent Sonic branding, they've decided that they're not allowed to call the planet Earth. It's just a nondescript, unnamed planet. It's Sonic's world, for some reason. But whatever, the planet's energy is restored, and you're like, yeah, I mean, you're kind of trying to do a classic Sonic thing there, where it's got the environmental, oh, they were sucking out the planet's energy, and now we fix it. But again, it's missing a lot more of the depth of the original stuff, and it's not quite there. And then Sonic comes back with his friends, and he's like, we did it, everyone, and now I'm gonna take a nap. The end. And oh my god, that was the worst. Wow, 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 wow. What I will give the story of Sonic Lost World is this. It is a story that is perfectly in line with the quality of the game itself. How fitting that a garbage game gets a garbage story to go along with it. That is truly gameplay and story synergy right there. Now I see, that's what Pontac and Graf were trying to do. They must have played the game and go, wow, this is terrible. I guess that must be the vision that Sonic Team is going for with this game. Okay, we can make a terrible story to match the game, sure. And they really succeeded at that. They did a great job. But to be a little bit more serious here, I've been very, very snarky and cynical in this video, more so than I usually am. But this story is just so bad, man. There are so many problems, so many flaws, so many pointless things, such bad story structure and writing, such bad dialogue. Everything here is done so poorly. It's kind of shocking to me to see this in a professional project. Like, yeah, Sonic stories have had a lot of problems both before and after this, but if you ask me, this is rock bottom. It does not get any worse than Sonic Lost World. Like, at least Sonic Colors, there were some redeemable things in there. There were some ideas that felt very Sonic. There was an attempt to try to do something more meaningful, and it just ended up really bad. But here there's nothing. It's just garbage that's done poorly. And I really can't say there's any redeeming factors or anything I like about this story whatsoever. And for anyone that's curious, when you go to the Japanese translation of things, similar to Sonic Colors, it's heavily modified and much, much better than the English version of it. Not only do they recharacterize the characters to make them like the actual Sonic characters, but so much of the dialogue, even if the characters say relatively the same things, it's just so much better, so much more elegant and to the point. So much of Pontac and Graph's dialogue is so overly wordy and clunky and awkward, and this is just so much cleaner. Like, take this scene in English.
Sonic, did you get those animals back from Eggman?
Just the one container he tossed off his Eggmobile.
Wait a minute, just the one? Weak. I would have gotten them all back by now.
Save the rest of them!
And now compare it to the Japanese version.
ねえソニック、動物さんたちは取り戻せたの？
まあ、とりあえず一つは取り返したぜ。
何ですって？
たった一つだと？一体何やってやがる？俺なら。
他の子たちも急いで。
That is so much better. It's basically saying the same thing, but without being needlessly wordy and over-explaining every single little thing. And it's like this across the entire story. I'm honestly quite impressed with what the Japanese localization team was able to do with this script and how much they were able to improve it. I mean, it's still the same plot overall, so it's still a bunch of meaningless, worthless junk, but at least the dialogue isn't the worst thing ever in the Japanese version, so that's something. Also, side note, I find the Japanese voice acting to be a little bit distracting, because a lot of the Deadly Six is voiced by very notable Japanese voice actors that I've heard from a bunch of other stuff. There's like Nami from One Piece and Soul Bad Guy from Guilty Gear in here. And that was really weird to hear that in Sonic, but kind of cool to hear some voice actors I recognize. Still, though, Japanese does not salvage this story in any way. At the end of the day, at best, it's just a very meaningless story with no substance to it, where nothing of importance happens. There's no good character stuff to attach yourself to. There's no good drama to invest you in what's happening. All the new characters are awful. It's just bad. It's bad. It's bad all around. This is just a terrible story, and that's how it is, and I really don't have much more to say than that.